Alright, so I have this awesome 1080 Strix which has been quite damaged during my latest studio move, so I've decided to instead adding new fans to get a little bit more fancy and install its custom-made EKWB Waterblock on it. I will try to keep it under 10 minutes, so let's dig right in. Here is our Waterblock, the EKFC 1080 GTX from EKWB. First thing we have to notice is there is a couple of bags, one with the thermopads and one with the different screws and other tools that we may need during the assembling. And here it is, the Waterblock, and I really like EKWB Waterblocks. I've been installing my fair share of them and they never disappointed me. Just keep in mind that if you do have a Strix video card, you need to order their Waterblocks well in advance. EKWB seems not to keep much stock of it and instead custom make them. But enough talking, let's assemble. We are going to need a 2mm Phillips screwdriver, and we are going to remove the 6 screws which holds our backplate to our PCB. Once that is done, we are going to go onto our display shield and remove these 2 screws. Needless to say, try to keep your screws in a safe place. We might need them later. Try to move the backplate away from the PCB without pulling it. It is still connected by a couple of cables which we have to delicately unplug. Make sure to do this operation carefully so that you do not dislodge the plug from the PCB itself. Alright, so now I am removing the PCB from its massive stock fan, which has seen better days. Next step, we are going to remove this metal plate right here, and to do so we have to unscrew not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 screws. For the ones who are keeping track, this is our 12 screw removed out of this card and we still have ways to go. Now once done, we have to remove the backplate from the PCB, and that's another 8 screws and therefore a total of 22 of them so far. But do not worry, we are almost done with the unscrewing. Once that is done, we are going to gently remove the shield plate, and remember it can be a little bit sticky on the RAM, so go slow. Here a final screw which was hidden by the plate, and finally we can remove the backplate and again unplug the RGB LED from the PCB. This one is particularly fragile, so really go slow so that again you do not damage the plug which is connected on our PCB. Alright, so here is our backplate, dirty and ready to go, and our NVIDIA GPU, which I am going to clean with a little bit of alcohol and a Q-tip. Once that is done, what we're going to do is to remove very quickly the dust on the different RAM modules and capacitors of our video card, and I'm using a little piece of Swiffer tissue to remove the obvious dust. Again, we want a clean area before putting the thermopads on. Talking of which, I am going to place the thermopads on our 8 RAM module right now and here. And if this is your first time, please do pay attention on how I'm doing it and make sure to take your time and do it as gently as possible. Most importantly, here you want to make sure that the thermopad does cover the entire surface of our silicon chipset. Next step, we are going to place some thermopads on the capacitors as shown on your screen. And yes, indeed, we are going to cut the thermopad to custom fit all the capacitors. We're gonna have a rather long rectangular one and add a smaller piece to make sure that all the capacitors are completely covered by that very precious thermopad. Once that is done, I am going to have to remove the protective film on the top of our thermopad, and this is by far the most annoying and difficult part of our operation, and the way I do it is to use a very thin razor blade so that I can slide it right between the thermopad, which is very fragile, and the film itself. And make sure to take your time doing so because we do have a limited amount of thermopads. Next step here is to put some fresh thermopaste on our GPU, and I am sure some people will criticize on how much I'm putting, not enough or too much. I am in a too much kind of school. I like to have a little bit more than necessary, but that is really up to you. Alright, so now here is the exciting part. We are going to put on the water block and ever gently try to make sure that all the screw holes do align with our PCBs. Be very gentle here because nothing is fixed and a little movement will undo everything we've done so far. I'm going to use the original box so that I can turn our video card on its water block and secure the PCB to the water block by putting the 7 screws shown on your screen. These screws come with plastic washers, so make sure to equip every screw with its equivalent plastic washer. It will protect our PCB from indelicate boulders. And by the way, when you are tightening our screws onto the PCB, make sure not to over tight it. These are very small screws and finger tight is plenty enough. Time to install our backplate, and even though this is an option, this is not something you need to have in order to operate a water-cooled video card. It is really important to me because it will add some additional heat deflection, hence, in my opinion, a must. And its installation is rather easy compared to what we've done so far. The only thing we have to take care of is adding a couple of thermopads, one right here for our VRM soldering point on our PCB, and one right here again for the soldering points of our GPU. Let's not forget to take our razor blade and delicately remove the protecting film from our thermopads, remembering how precious this can be. So yeah, do take your time. The next and final step of this video is to assemble the backplate to the PCB, and to do so we are going to make sure that all the holes and screw holes are correctly aligned, and we are going to secure one to the other using the 6 provided screws. Again, keep in mind that we do not want to over tight them, so finger tight is plenty. And finally, this assembling wouldn't be complete without this very last screw. And of course, you must have guessed it, you are going to see me using this very card on my very next video on my Obsidian 900 upgrade, the third of its kind.